G'day guys, Casey from Lured In Fishing here. Today I would like to show you how we can use something like a yakker, a slimy mackerel, a trevally, any of those bigger bait fish, how we can use them, how we can turn them into a range of different baits. So this instance I'll be using yakkers. All of this is applicable for a heap of different fish. So anything like yakkers, red rockets, whole whiting, slimy mackerel, trevally, the whole works, all that same kind of size and profile. All of these cuts and ways to rig up these baits on different rigs is applicable to each of those. So when I'm looking at a bait like this, there's a range of different ways we could use it. So number one, we could fish the entire thing as a really big bait for a really big fish. If I wanted to put out a bait for a shark or something like that, whole bait like that, super oily, it's going to work an absolute treat. If I was using this for, say, snapper, jewfish, using big chunk of mullet for like mangrove jack, fishing for, just about anything, big queenies, big snapper, big mulloway, any of these bigger bait fish, this is how I like to prepare them. So, number one is for doing things like doing cutlets, cutting off the head, I like to use a short boning knife or just a bait knife, nice and sharp. So number one bait is going to be the head. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come down just behind the back of his gills here and behind his pectoral fin, come all the way down, press nice and hard, make sure your fingers aren't in the way. We're going to cut straight through his backbone, just like so, and then once again through the other side of that fillet. Nice oily stinky bait. You can probably see there's flies flying around me at the moment. That just shows how irresistible these things are as far as a scent attractant. So we've taken off his head. Up to you whether you want to leave his fins on. I normally do, doesn't really bother me, but some people do like to remove them just to get a really nice, well presented bait. So that's essentially his head. Next is what I like to call a cutlet or a chunk bait. So you can do this for the whole fish. I'll normally like to use a whole fish and get 3 different types of baits out of it. So I'll get a head, a couple of cutlets, and then maybe a fillet or a tail section. So for a cutlet, once again, short, sharp knife. I'm going to go about 2.5 centimeters wide, about an inch. Once again, cutting straight down. I'm going to go all the way down to the backbone, press down nice and hard, through the backbone, through his dorsal fin there. Now, depending on the type of fish, some are easy, some are a little bit harder. Yakkers have relatively thick bones, so we're going to flip him over, cut through that other side there, so we get a nice, neat cutlet. Leave his guts in, as oily and as messy as we can get him. Just going to attract fish really, really well. So I'll do that again. I'll get another cutlet out of this section. Once again, through his backbone, right the way down. Now the fresher your bait, the better these tend to come out. This guy was in the freezer for a while, so there's our second cutlet there. It's essentially just like a cross section of our whole fish. So we have 2 cutlets. I then like to do a couple of essentially fillets. Now, being that we've already done his head and these cutlets, we're actually going to go from our tail upwards. What I like to do while I've still got my little bait knife, my solid knife out, just going to cut through. He's got these kind of scoots down his tail here, which are quite hard. I'll just try to get in between one of them. Just gently kind of sawing, trying to get through that. Right, once we've got through that, we can use our filleting knife to take the fillet off the fish. So another good way I find to get under those scoots with your filleting knife, if you don't have a boning knife, press in just underneath them, and that's how we're going to start our fillet. So we're going to fillet away from my left hand. I'm going to just run our knife along the backbone, trying not to press down too hard. We don't want to cut through that backbone. We just want to take off that fillet. So keeping our knife nice and horizontal, kind of sawing back and forth, working our way through being relatively soft because it's not a fresh yakker, we're just going to kind of saw back and forth so we get a nice fillet of our yakker. Now for this bottom piece just here, which is still connected, just fill it all the way down to the tail there, and that will come off nicely. So that's our fillet there. I'll do the same off the other side, throw out the rest of that frame, and I'll use just a whole fillet of yakker. Now, as far as rigging all these different baits up, to start off, I'm going to show you how we rig up our whole fillet, or our half fillet. So, we're going to use a snell rig, the suitable size. So you essentially want your snell rig to be nearly the total size of your fillet, or your section of fillet. So it's our snell rig there, that's our fillet, bottom hook, top hook. What we're going to do, first of all, top hook, I'm going to go in the meat side of our yakker, right in the middle and towards the very tip of the fillet. You go right in that little red lateral line there, and just gently work that hook through. Once again, those little scoots on the other side give you a little bit of drama, so you just got to be extra careful. Just slowly push that point through. Once it's through, it ain't coming out. Right, one hook on the skin side of the fillet, just like so. Next is on the meat side, we're going to use our bottom hook. So pull your fillet out nice and straight, get an idea of where that hook's going to sit, right towards the bottom. We're going to grab our whole fillet. We're going to, once again, nice and central, lateral line area. Now, on these flesh baits, I kind of like to punch through the skin, so I go all the way in, out the back side, making sure to not hook my fingers on the back. Right, out the back side. Then we can flip him over, you can see what I've done there. Pulled that hook all the way through. Then I'm going to come back in through the skin, being extra careful as we do so, and pulling that hook out like so. So the weight of our fillet is on that top hook, so when we cast it, it's not going to rip that bottom hook out. Have a hook on both sides of the fillet there. Bottom hook buried in that flesh, good hook exposure there, and then top hook pinned at the top of our yakker fillet, like so. Big fish is going to come along, eat that, they will not miss those 2 points. So that's how we rig up our fillet, whether it's a half fillet or a whole fillet. If I'm using a whole fillet, longer snell rig, bigger hooks. Alright, so next bait from our yakker is our cutlet. That guy there. So, looks a bit grimy, this one, being kind of older bait. They will look much, much neater when they're fresh. Now, for my big flesh baits, like my big cutlets, I really like to use a circle hook. It does sometimes take a big fish a bit of time to get these down. They're a fantastic bait and they're super durable on the hook, but taking fish a while to get them down, they'll chew on them for a while. Find that circle hook and allowing that rod to load up tends to work really well, especially for big gummy shark, big jew, big snapper, things like that. Just letting them chew on that little lollipop there. They sit there, hook up absolutely perfectly rather than gut hooking, which is really, really common with your octopus hooks. So we have the top of our cutlet, the belly of our cutlet. I'll push the guts out of it just to show you this, but I'll normally leave them in when I'm rigging for myself. Just going to get our circle hook, suitable size. This is a 4/0. And we're just going to go about 1/2 centimetre from the top of the cutlet there. I'm going to go through the skin, back out the other side, through the skin again, and that's just going to sit in the belly of that circle hook. Going to dangle nicely. It's not going to spin in the current. Make sure it's not sideways, anything like that. Hangs really neatly, and that is our cutlet there. Alrighty guys, so for our final piece of our large fish, being our yakker, is the head. So to rig up the head, I like to use a double hook snell rig. The reason being, we have quite a large bait there, plenty of room for 2 hooks. Also a very hard bait, so very bony. Unlike a fillet, that a fish can come along, swallow the fillet, squash the whole bait up and find that hook. Being a head bait, they're going to have to chew on it for a little bit of time, and having 2 hooks in there, we have more chance of a fish coming along and actually hitting one of those points. So, how I like to do this. Starting once again with our top hook, so that's taking the load of the bait. So our top hook up here is we're going to pin in through the top of the mouth, just there. Make sure you're coming in past your bait's lips. So with a yakker, when you open their mouth, they've got those big lips that come out like that. This is all really soft, so we want to make sure we're going in a little bit further than that into the actual top of the mouth and pulling our hook through like so. So we have our head just there, hook through the top, nice and central, nice and straight, and that's going to bear the load of that entire bait. Now, our bottom hook on our snail. We have 1 hook facing that way. The second hook here, I like to get it as close to the bottom of the bait as possible. Normally I like to come in the gullet here, just under his gills, kind of twist that hook around, and I go in. This is usually a relatively soft piece of meat down here, in and back out, like so. And there we have our yakker. We're through the collar of the bait here. If I've taken the collar off our bait, I'll hook that second hook up through the top here. But if I do have that collar on there, second hook down the bottom, top hook bearing the load of that bait, and that is how we rig up our final bait from our whole fish.